for API. Just before we get started, once again, this session is recorded, and the recording will be placed on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, you could drop off now. So let's get started. So Defender for API, actually, like most of the presentations, or announcements that talk specifically about Defender for API, I found it more useful if we talk about Defender first, because Defender for API is just an extension or just an additional plan, a next logical step actually, and the gap that used to be in Defender. So if we understand what's Defender for API would become very like intuitive to understand. So let's quickly cover Microsoft Defender. Here's our quick agenda overview of Microsoft Defender, and then we look at the Defender for API, why we need it, what it is, and why we need it, some of the key features, and then I'll do a demo. I have to admit today that the presentation is like more verbose than I would like it to be, but I thought the information are useful. Naveed always shares these, so you could come back and read them, but I'm not gonna go over all the text. We'll try to focus on the demos as we always do. All right, as you know, Build Microsoft annual conference for developers today is raw for it, but still, if you missed it, you could go and check the book of news, a very organized way of catching up on all the announcements. I encourage you to go visit that link and catch up on Build. Alrighty, so what is Microsoft Defender? It's a security solution end-to-end that protect like your workloads. However, like I emphasized here, it's Microsoft Defender, is not Azure Defender, and the name could give you a good like idea on what is Defender. It's actually not just an Azure security solution. It extends to securing workloads on AWS and GCP, even on premise. We also have like Defender for M365, Defender for endpoint protection, which basically like deploys on a mobile phone or a terminal to protect that endpoint. So it's a holistic security solution from Microsoft. And of course, part of it is Defender for Cloud, which resides on Azure, integrates natively with Azure, as we'll see later on. So this is, I probably covered these already, built in with Azure, supports multi-cloud, gives you a dashboard that gives you a security score and an easy way to mitigate any risks, to increase your security posture or harden your security posture. Also, it has advanced threat protection, which is basically an AI-based anomaly detection. Like a glimpse of the dashboard that you get. Yes, probably you could like here you could see that it's connected to AWS and GCP. In addition, of course, to its built-in capability to integrate with Azure. As you could see, it gives you a score of each workload, and you could then drill down to see how you could increase this score. Also, it has like a native ability to check your workload against compliance standards. For example, HIPAA. If you want to know if you are compliant with HIPAA standards, PCI, etc. These are very required in multiple industries. That actually gives you a nice dashboard to tell you if you are compliant or not. If you are not, why you are not compliant, and also what to do to be compliant. Very useful. Supports full stack. Again, here, like you could see VMs, you could see AKS, Key Vault. Each one has specific recommendations attached to it. Also, as I mentioned, you could deploy agents to your on-prem and then surface these insights to the same Azure Defender. And now we have in private preview, as of I think like last week, it was private preview, probably is now generally available, Defender for serverless and Defender for AI. Probably good topics to cover later on in our Azure Power Lunch sessions. Also, we have Defender for DevOps. And today we are discussing Defender for API. As you can see, it's like part of the overall Defender umbrella. All right, so what's Defender for API then? It's, as the name suggests, gives you protection for your APIs as a full lifecycle protection from the deployment to before going to production. It analyzes the APIs and suggests what steps that you could do to increase security to those APIs before going to production. And then when you are in production, it does real-time monitoring of these APIs and gives you recommendations and also alerts you if there is any security incident. Folks, I can't see the chat, so you could feel free to go off mute anytime, or you could put a question on chat. We could later on come back to these questions, but feel free to come off mute if you have any question, please. All right. So this slide like talks about how like the internet is driven by APIs. I don't think I need to explain this to any further extent. Anybody who's on the IT space knows the importance and how like of APIs and how ubiquitous they are. So 83% of internet traffic here is said to be driven by APIs. And the attacks, if you look at this, like 90% of web application will expose an attack via API. These are like scary numbers, honestly. And here I have some statistics. LinkedIn, for example, exposed data of 700 million users. Of course, like data being exposed doesn't necessarily mean data being used or exploited, but still, these are API exposed data. So we clearly need a solution specific to APIs. Now, you might be thinking, we already have solutions, security solutions that are that protects APIs. Why do we need this new solution? It's basically, if in the shortest way to think about it, what all the solutions that we had before Defender for API are rule-based. You could set a rule, for example, to say if there are, I want to enforce these specific headers, for example, in the request, and if there is any other header in the request, just reject it, let's say. Or if there's a missing header, reject it. This is just a rule-based. There is no way before Defender for API to monitor the behavior of the endpoint and do, take actions based on the behavior. So, and attackers, of course, you would imagine, if they did their job, they know that your WAF would reject any request that doesn't have the necessarily headers. So that wasn't always the problem, or probably is not always the biggest issue when you are looking at your security. So Defender for API fills that gap, the behavior. It looks at, and this is of course AI based, it looks at the behavior of your API. It has a baseline for what it should be, and it detects, it alerts you for any anomaly. And then it gives you also the option to act on these anomalies. I promise not to spend a lot of time on slides, and this is the problem with these build-ups. They take forever. So, okay. So what's the main feature? Mentioned that traffic detection, real-time thread detection, and it's based on AI. So from the slide, I just wanted to take that this starts from the DevOps, actually, the analysis of the APIs, and then the classification. It classifies your API at this as this is like exposing sensitive. It labels them for you that this is the kind of security this is exposing. So even before you're going to production with the APIs, before the real-time monitoring happens, you have a good idea using the service of what your API looks like, what kind of protection they need, or what kind of security surface attack they expose. Okay, this we'll look at it and the demo, but this is an example of how like it's classifying. This is authenticated, unauthenticated. It's okay. Let's go to the demo. We'll come back to the slides. I'm always afraid that I'll miss some important things, but here and the rest of the slides talk about some of the common attacks, how Defender for API protects you from leaky APIs, for example, exposing data. You could always come back to them, as I mentioned. Okay, let's go to the Azure portal. So portal.azure.com. Okay, so first thing you want to do is onboard your APIs to Defender for API. And you could do it in two ways. The first way, you go to Microsoft Defender. Remember, we talked about Microsoft Defender, the overall umbrella. When we clicked here, we are not at Defender for API yet. We are at the general Microsoft Defender that protects all your cloud. And now I want to enable my APIs. You go to environment settings, you select your subscription. I have one demo subscription in this case. And as you can see, I have a plan for servers, app services, database, etc. And now we have in here API plan that we could enable for specifically for APIs. Just I'll show you the pricing at the moment. So this $200 for 1 million API calls. Anyways, you would want to make sure that this is on, and this is enabled at the subscription level. It's not at one API management instance level. It's at the subscription level. So here, if you look at action required, it tells you that you go to recommendations of the security recommendation. Let's copy this. Well, actually, it's what I want to. I'm just following the instruction here to onboard your APIs. Go to the recommendation and look for Azure API management. API should be onboarded. Okay, so let's go to the recommendation. And here, of course, it has a recommendation for what I should do to harden my security posture on this subscription. I'm gonna, as mentioned, look for API, and you will see that here one of the recommendations that I should onboard my Defender or onboard my APIs to Defender for API. So if you click on that, it will tell you exactly which APIs that are not onboarded yet. I have one that's onboarded. I'll show it to you, but if you starting new, that's what you're gonna do. Go to the settings, follow the instructions, and fix it here. If you click fix, that will onboard your APIs to a Defender for API. Now, this process, I have to say, wasn't as smooth as it should probably be. It took time to enable it at the subscription level. It took time to fix this issue. I went back to my APIs. I know it takes time for them to show up, like you're saying, freshness interval. Even after 90 minutes, I still so have some patience with it. It wasn't as smooth, unfortunately, as I expected, but it's was just generally available probably last week. So probably things will get better. Or also like, my subscription, probably a demo subscription doesn't have production level capability. I'm just letting you know my experience, just because do not rush to looking at online what the issue is. It might be just a time issue. So yeah. Anyway, onboard your APIs should be after you fixed that they are onboarded. And let me show you the other way you could onboard them. If you go to your API management instance, it's, by the way, it's required to have an API instance on your subscription. And the Defender for API looks for the API management to look for the APIs. If you don't have that, you need to have that because it sits on top of it. Okay.
So Ala, if you have like an app service that's serving API, you cannot use it. You have to have an APIM first that serves those APIs in order to use the API Defender, right?
That's right. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the other way you could have onboarded it, if you open API management and you could go to Defender for Cloud and follow the instruction, same thing from two different places. I like always to focus on this here, because if you are looking at just the security of your APIs, you won't get much. Actually, the most useful analysis you could get from any security solution is looking holistically at your workload, because sometimes some alerts might be actually not security, not cyber attacks at all. They could be legitimate usage of your API. What makes them an attack or not is correlating them with other events from your workload. For example, somebody is from the same IP is hitting the VM at the same time. It's also trying to use your API in a way that's unusual. The correlation of these events might lead you to think that this API is doing something suspicious. So let's see here. Now, Azure Defender for Cloud, as you could expect now, APIs should be first-class citizen here. They should be monitored, analyzed. So if I go to the workload protections here, in addition to SQL, Key Vault, storage, you should be able to see API security here. And if I open this, this is the API that I onboarded, still saying awaiting that. That was on some of them, because this is actually a sample API that I deployed, but I'm using some, I tried to hit these multiple times for it to gather data. So you could see it's complaining here that these two endpoints are unauthenticated. And if I open one of them, it gives you this. As you could see, an exact description of why it's complaining or why it flagged this, that this should be incorrect or missing authentication, and what to do to remediate this. So you could even assign a workflow automation, that basically a logic app that goes and enforces, in this case, unauthenticated. It could enforce authentication. If it's complaining about, I don't know, suspicious IP, you could run a logic app that adds a rule to WAF to block that IP, etc. Okay, and it shows you if this was an incident, the attacker is in the initial access phase. So that's also a nice thing to know, because if you are correlating events, you want to know where this could lead. Are they in the attack phase? They already breached the system. They are still at the initial phase. Good information to know. Okay. What else I want to show you? I showed you the workload protection. We saw that API is part of the now protection. Let's look at the Security Explorer. Also, you could see here a lot of queries that you could run to correlate events. I'm going to look for a query that's related to APIs. For example, we should expect this to come back with some results because we know that I had 2 endpoints that are unauthenticated. So let's open the query here. And you could see a visual representation of that, what the query is going to run, what it's going to look like. Of course, you could modify this to correlate it with other services. Let's search. Let's see what this query returns. We expect it to return these 2 endpoints, and yeah, no surprises there. Of course, it detects these 2 endpoints. These are the same endpoints, the get topics and get sessions, the same endpoints that were flagged at the beginning. All right. So if this was a heavy used API, you would have seen better insights. So instead of like getting stuck to just these 2 unauthenticated, I could show you some sample alerts. And if you, as you could see, they are labeled as sample alerts. And if you want to know how I cheated, you could see here security, where is it? Sample alerts. You could generate a sample alert for app service, DNS, etc. So I selected the API and asked it to give me some sample alerts. And we could see actually some interesting things here. For example, let's see. Suspicious user agent detected. If you click on that will give you exactly why it flagged this as suspicious. It maybe this is what it's saying. User agent request accessing one of your API endpoints containing anomalous values indicative or indicative of attempt of remote code execution. Basically, like your there, it detected some input that probably the code that's injected is not the parameters you are expecting. And this could be, of course, like an attempt of hijacking your system. What else? All of these are actually interesting. There's one this, for example, it's saying unusually large response payload. Now that's, remember back to the point that this could be very legitimate. Somebody, user is returning, or the client, the system that's using these APIs could possibly return a large payload, and this could be normal. But still, this is flagged because, yeah, returning a larger payload than usual could be also data exfiltration, right? So, and it alerted this or flagged this because there's a baseline that's running, or it takes a snapshot of a baseline and then it compares these to that baseline. So just before this Defender for API, there was no way to detect such an attack, because this is a completely legitimate call to your endpoint. It returned, in this case, it returned a larger than usual payload. But everything is legitimate. The headers are legitimate. It's authenticated. Everything is legitimate about it. So this is nice that you are now able to detect such things. All right. If I had more interesting data, you would have seen in the path analysis, really like cool analysis of what the path that the attacker took and what the possible next steps for the attacker to do if they gain access to this, for example, piece of your system. Then next they might do this. So it tells you what's the possible path and how to protect from it. But now I don't have enough data for it to show. Of course, you could always go to the recommendations and see also like a system level recommendation, and some of these recommendations will be related to your APIs. All right, I'll stop here, and if there are questions, take questions. We still have 3 minutes.
Yeah, folks, please feel free to ask questions.
Okay, so if there are no questions, the takeaway from Defender for API, but I would like you, if you remember, just a couple of things, that this is behavior-based security solution, and it protects you from business logic abuse attacks. Give 1 more minute. Any questions? The slides will be, as usual, attached to the session on Azure Power Lunch. Naveed, please correct me if I'm wrong. You could always go back to them and read more. All right, Naveed, this is a wrap for me.
Thank you very much,
folks,
everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Allah, for presenting. And I hope to see everybody next week for another session of Power Lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.